The briefing room aboard the Zevarian dreadnought was quiet except for the low hum of the ship's reactors. Commander Reth Varix stood at the head of the table, his arms folded across his chest, eyes scanning the holoprojection that floated in the air between him and his officers. The image showed a star map of the neutral zone, an asteroid field on the fringe of contested space. At its center was a blinking marker, the designated meeting point. Reth had been summoned from patrol duty without explanation, told only that this was a council-sanctioned operation involving a species he had never heard of before: humans. The name alone sounded crude, unimaginative. In 40 campaigns he had faced insectoid hive fleets, crystalline war forms, predatory gas beings, and more, yet never had a mission begun with such vagueness. The intelligence packet had been laughably small. According to the Council's records, humans had only just begun to travel between stars. Their weapons were described as primitive chemical projectiles. Their largest ships, barely 800 meters long, were slower than the Zevarian cargo haulers. They had no energy shields, no gravity weapons, no known advanced materials. It sounded less like an evaluation of a future ally and more like the profile of a soon-to-be client species, a protectorate. Reth's fleet was 10 dreadnoughts strong, each a floating fortress bristling with heavy plasma batteries, missile pods, and gravitic disruptors. An additional 2 cruisers served as support. The mission parameters were simple: arrive ahead of the human delegation, take position in the asteroid field, and be certain that the humans understood the scale of Council power. They would be offered minor membership if they were sensible enough to accept it without protest. Across the table, Envoy Lestra sat with her hands clasped, her expression unreadable. She had the look of someone who measured every word before speaking it. Reth had worked with her once before, and he remembered she was cautious to the point of paranoia. Her eyes stayed fixed on the map as she finally broke the silence. "Commander, have you noticed how much of the human intelligence packet is missing?" Reth raised a brow. "It's sparse, yes, but there's not much to report about a species that's barely spacefaring." Lestra's gaze shifted to him, sharp and intent. "That's not what I mean. Several sections are tagged as classified beyond our level. Sections on military structure, resource capacity, and strategic assessment." Reth frowned. Council secrecy was nothing new, but it was unusual for such restrictions to apply to a mission as straightforward as this one. "Perhaps the analysts haven't finished compiling data," he suggested, though the explanation felt weak even as he said it. "Or perhaps," Lestra replied quietly, "someone doesn't want us to know everything before we arrive." Reth dismissed the thought with a wave of his hand. "We're the ones with a fleet. If there was anything dangerous about these humans, it would be in our reports. They're new to the stars. We'll show them their place and send them home." Still, as the meeting adjourned and Reth returned to the bridge, he couldn't shake the strange tension in the air. Classified data on a primitive race. A neutral zone meeting point. A mission framed as diplomacy, yet ordered to be backed by overwhelming force. The orders were clear, but somewhere in the back of his mind a quiet thought took root. If the humans were truly so harmless, why did the Council seem afraid to speak openly about them? The asteroid field stretched before them like a frozen ocean, its jagged fragments drifting in slow, eternal motion. Shadows slid across the bridge of the dreadnought as each tumbling rock blocked the light from the distant sun. Commander Reth Varix stood at the forward viewport, hands clasped behind his back, watching the endless ballet of stone and darkness. They had arrived hours ahead of schedule. The other 9 dreadnoughts and 2 cruisers of his fleet drifted in a loose ring formation around the rendezvous point. Hulls gleamed in the dim light, weapons powered, engines idling. It was the very image of power. 13 warships from one of the galaxy's oldest military traditions, positioned like hunters waiting for prey. But their prey did not come. No hyperspace ripples, no drive signatures, no faint chatter on comm bands. The humans, whoever they were were simply absent. Reth checked the chronometer again. They were not late by diplomatic standards, not yet. But every minute that passed without a sign of the human ship made the stillness heavier. A few of his junior officers had begun to whisper that perhaps the humans had lost their nerve. It was not uncommon for young species to accept a council invitation and then reconsider at the last moment. "Still nothing?" he asked without looking away from the viewport. His sensor chief, Lieutenant Haxrin, ran another sweep. "Negative, Commander. No contacts within 20 million clicks. Space is quiet." Envoy Lestra, standing at a nearby console, tapped her clawed fingers against the edge of the display. "Too quiet," she murmured, not quite under her breath. Reth turned his head slightly. "Suspicious already, Envoy?" "Patterns matter, Commander. A new species makes a formal request for Council recognition. The Council schedules an evaluation meeting in a neutral zone, and yet they arrive here with nothing. No escort, no advance probe, no pre-meeting transmission. That's not just odd, it's deliberate." Reth gave a low, humorless chuckle. "Or perhaps they're still learning how to navigate hyperspace lanes without getting lost." Lestra didn't answer. She stared at the holographic map, her eyes fixed on the dark expanse beyond the asteroid field. Minutes stretched into an hour. The field remained unchanged. Reth was about to order the fleet into a patrol circuit when a soft chime came from the sensor pit. "Commander," Haxrin said, his voice cautious, "I'm detecting something." Reth stepped to his side. "Define something." "It's faint. A low-emission mass signature. Not enough for an active drive system. It's drifting, coming in from vector 72/3. Lestra leaned forward. "Visuals." The main viewport shifted, stars blurring as the image aligned. At first, Reth saw nothing, just a black emptiness between two slow-spinning asteroids. Then, as a sliver of starlight caught an edge, a shape emerged. It was long, smooth, featureless, no glowing drive plume, no running lights, just a dark silhouette against the deeper black of space. Reth's first thought was that it resembled an unmarked cargo hauler. His second was that it moved with a steadiness no derelict should have. "Identify," he ordered. Haxrin shook his head. "Hull composition unknown. Scans aren't bouncing back properly. It's absorbing the signal." Absorbing. Reth frowned. "Any sign of weapons?" "None visible, no shield harmonics, no standard sensor arrays, nothing." "That's not nothing," Lestra said softly. "That's hiding." The bridge went silent. Even the ambient hum of the dreadnought seemed to fade as the strange vessel continued its slow, steady approach. It was not broadcasting any identification code. It was not answering any hails. It did not deviate from its path by a single degree. Reth stared at it, a cold, unfamiliar sensation threading into his gut. The humans, it seemed, had arrived after all. But they had done so like a shadow in the void, silent, patient, and unreadable. The dreadnought's tactical display pulsed with the alien ship's marker. Reth glanced at it, then back at the dark shape sliding between asteroids. "Bring the fleet to full readiness," he said, voice low but sharp. "Let's see what our guests are made of." The black silhouette crept closer, swallowing starlight as it came. The longer it loomed on the main viewport, the less it looked like a simple transport and the more it seemed like something alive, something watching them. No flicker of running lights, no blinking navigation beacons, just that dark, deliberate presence, sliding between asteroids as if the rocks themselves bent aside to let it pass. On the bridge of the Zevarian dreadnought Iron Will, the crew kept their voices low, as though speaking too loudly might draw its attention. Commander Reth Varix stood rigid, claws tapping against the railing in a slow, restless rhythm. He'd seen countless alien ships, organic leviathans from the Clyer hives, massive crystal barges from the Solith Combine, but never one that drank the light around it. "Distance, 25,000 clicks," reported Lieutenant Haxrin. "Speed constant, trajectory direct to rendezvous point." "Scan it again," Reth ordered. "I have been, sir," Haxrin replied, frustration in his tone. "Standard sweeps, gravimetric pulses, subspace resonance pings. It's like throwing stones into a black lake. The signals just vanish." Envoy Lestra stood a little apart, her posture straight, eyes narrowed at the image on the display. "No heat bloom from the drives?" "None," Haxrin confirmed. "If they're using engines, they're masked beyond anything I've seen. Even Council stealth ships bleed thermal signatures." "Or," Lestra said, her voice almost a whisper, "this isn't stealth. This is something else entirely." The bridge lights dimmed briefly as the main display shifted to a magnified image. The alien vessel now filled the center of the view, a long, almost cylindrical hull with a taper at each end. At first glance, it was smooth, like the hull of a refinery barge. But the closer Reth looked, the more his instincts itched. There was a texture to that black surface, subtle ridges and shallow grooves just visible under the faintest touch of starlight. Then it began to turn. Not a random drift, not a simple course correction, but a slow, deliberate roll along its axis. The kind of maneuver a predator makes when sizing up a potential threat, or prey. "Sir," Haxrin said, his voice tight, "I'm seeing changes in the hull." Reth leaned forward, eyes narrowing. As the vessel rotated, the light caught on lines he hadn't noticed before, long seams running parallel along the length of the hull, intersected by sharper angles. At first, they looked like natural panel divisions, but then sections of the outer skin seemed to shift, adjusting by fractions of a degree, like scales settling into place. "What am I looking at?" Reth demanded. "Those aren't seams," Haxrin said. "Those are hatches." More details revealed themselves with every degree of rotation. Circular outlines that could be launch tubes, rectangular panels set flush with the armor, each large enough to conceal a heavy weapon battery. Small protrusions began sliding outward from the smooth black surface, locking into place. "It's opening up," one of the weapons officers breathed. Reth's pulse quickened, but not from excitement. This was supposed to be a primitive envoy ship. The Council's file described them as slow, lightly armed, and thousands of years behind modern naval design. But what he saw before him now looked like the exact opposite. A warship built with an obsessive focus on concealment until the moment it chose to bare its teeth. The vessel continued to rotate, exposing the other side of its hull. More hatches, more hidden structures. His mind did quick, unwanted calculations. If each hatch concealed a weapon, the armament loadout would dwarf even a Zevarian dreadnought. Lestra finally broke the silence. "Commander, this doesn't look like an envoy ship to me." No one on the bridge disagreed. The quiet was thick, tense. Outside, the black ship finished its slow rotation and settled into a new orientation, broadside to the fleet, as if deliberately giving them a full view. For the first time in the mission, Reth Varix felt the sharp edge of doubt cut through his certainty. The humans were not what they seemed, and this ship was their first message. The black vessel drifted broadside now, presenting its full length against the scattered glow of the asteroid field. To an untrained eye, it might have looked passive, a silent piece of void black metal floating in the dark. But to Commander Reth Varix, every instinct screamed that it was watching them, evaluating them the way a duelist studies an opponent's stance before striking. The bridge of the Iron Will was dead silent. No one dared speak above a murmur. Even the constant background hum of the dreadnought's systems felt subdued, as if the ship itself was holding its breath. "Magnify," Reth ordered quietly. The viewport zoomed in until the alien vessel filled the display. Every detail of its strange surface was now visible. The seams and panels no longer subtle, but a patchwork of deliberate, calculated divisions. They ran at strange angles, intersecting in patterns that defied the standard logic of warship design. "What in the deep void are those shapes?" murmured Weapons Officer Drez. "Not decorative," Haxran said, his hands flying over the sensor controls. "I'm reading micro-movements across the hull, tiny shifts, like muscle contractions, panels adjusting their position." The slow, deliberate changes were mesmerizing. Plates shifted by mere millimeters, locking into place as if forming the outer skin of something much more dangerous beneath. The ship was preparing, no, unfolding. Then came the first true sign. One of the long rectangular panels recessed into the hull slid backward with mechanical precision, revealing a massive cylindrical bore that reflected no light. A hollow tube, easily wide enough to swallow a fighter craft whole, now stared directly toward the Zevarian fleet. A collective tension filled the air. "That," said Drez, "is no mining laser." Another panel shifted, and then another. All along the hull, weapon housings emerged like a predator's fangs, silent and patient. What had once been a sleek, featureless silhouette was transforming into an arsenal. Lestra's voice was calm, but there was a steel edge to it. "Commander, I have seen many species parade their weapons as intimidation. This is not that. This is declaration." Reth didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the display, where smaller hatches were irising open along the midsection. From within, compact turrets rose, their barrels glinting faintly. Each one began a slow, automated sweep, tracking the fleet's positions as if mapping the quickest way to kill them all. Haxran's readings scrolled across the side of the display. Estimating 178 individual weapon emplacements so far, and the scan's incomplete. We're losing readings again. Some of them are still shielded from sensors. 178, Drez repeated, his voice low. Our dreadnought carries 52. And the human vessel was not done. As the slow rotation continued, Reth saw massive circular bays along the ventral side begin to peel open, exposing launch tubes packed in dense, predatory clusters. The design was alien to Zevarian doctrine. Too many weapons crammed into too little space, optimized not for longevity, but for overwhelming initial firepower. The tension on the bridge became palpable. Several officers glanced at Reth, waiting for him to call an alert. He didn't. Not yet. His pride wouldn't allow it. Not while the humans hadn't fired a shot. Then the final detail came into view. Near the bow, just behind the forward armor bulge, a set of white characters was stenciled into the hull. The ship's name. The translation software processed it instantly and fed the words into the display. UES Retributor. Lestra stared at the name for a long moment. That, she said softly, is not the name of a vessel sent to impress diplomats. The ship's slow turn stopped. It faced the Zevarian fleet broadside, its weapons now fully exposed, every barrel, tube, and turret locked in silent readiness. And in that moment, the absurdity of the Council's reports struck Reth like a physical blow. This was not a primitive envoy. This was a predator, clothed in the black skin of war, and it was here for a reason. The Retributor no longer resembled the quiet, unmarked silhouette that had emerged from the dark. It had shed that false skin like a serpent revealing the scales beneath. Every surface now bristled with silent, watching weapons. There was no wasted motion, no unnecessary flourish, only the slow, methodical readiness of something built for one purpose. On the bridge of the Iron Will, every officer could feel it in their bones. This was not intimidation as a show of bravado. This was the cold, confident weight of a predator that knew it could kill you and saw no reason to prove it. Commander Reth Varix kept his eyes locked on the main display, his posture iron straight. He wanted to believe the humans were bluffing, that this display was some elaborate attempt to buy leverage in the coming negotiations. But deep down, instinct told him this was no bluff. The sensor feed began filling with new data, trickling through the interference the Retributor's strange hull material caused. Energy levels spiked, faint at first, then building steadily. What worried Haxrin most was not the raw numbers, it was the way the power was being distributed. "They're not routing to shields," the lieutenant reported, his voice tight. "And it's not just weapons charging. I'm seeing multiple high-capacity conduits active at once, but the readings don't match any known drive or defense systems." "Explain," Reth said sharply. Haxrin hesitated. "I can't. Whatever they're doing, it's deliberate, and it's big." Out beyond the viewport, the ship continued its silent transformation. Midsection panels unfolded like armored petals, revealing deep internal chambers. From these, huge, thick-barreled guns emerged on rotating mounts, each one locking into place with mechanical precision. At their scale, they were not designed for skirmish or deterrence. They were siege weapons, ship killers. "They've hidden everything," Dres whispered. "Every turret, every battery, every launch bay, concealed until now. Who hides this much firepower unless they plan to decide when they're seen?" Lestra finally spoke, her voice carrying through the tense air. "Commander, this is not the posture of a species seeking protection or minor membership. They are here to send a message, and the message is for us." Her words struck a chord in Reth, though he would not admit it. More changes unfolded. Dozens of smaller spheres emerged from recessed sockets along the hull, each no larger than a crew pod. They floated free for only a moment before beginning to orbit the human ship in intricate patterns. "What are those?" Reth demanded. Haxrin's hands danced over his console. "They're emitting microsignals, low bandwidth, coordinated movement, like a defensive screen." The truth clicked in Reth's mind. Autonomous drones, probably point defense or counter-missile systems. "Point defense?" Dres asked, watching the swarm multiply. "Commander, there are hundreds of them." The swarm tightened, then loosened again in a strange, fluid choreography, forming an invisible barrier between the human ship and the Zevarian fleet. It was beautiful in its precision, every orbit calculated, every angle covered. And then the Retributor did something that froze the bridge into utter silence. From the forward hull, a single massive cannon swiveled until its bore was aimed directly at the iron will. The black of its barrel seemed to swallow the light around it. No threat was issued, no warning transmission. The gesture was enough. Every officer on the bridge felt it. The quiet, surgical targeting of something that could tear their flagship apart in a single shot. It wasn't a declaration of war. It was a reminder. Reth's jaw clenched. The humans had chosen their opening move, and they had done so without firing a shot. And as much as he hated the thought, Reth was starting to realize they didn't need to. The first sound from the human vessel was not a weapons discharge, but a soft chime on the Iron Will's comm board. The audio tone was so ordinary, so almost casual, that for a moment it didn't register as the most dangerous thing that had happened all day. "Commander," the comms officer said, glancing over his shoulder, "we're receiving a direct transmission. Tight beam. Encrypted. But the decryption is already done." Reth frowned. "Already done?" "Yes, sir. The translation system didn't even cycle. It's as if they sent it pre-translated directly into our core protocols." Envoy Lestra's eyes narrowed. "They knew exactly what systems we use. That means they've studied our communications infrastructure in detail." "Put it on screen," Reth ordered. The main display flickered from the silent image of the Retributor to a close-up of a human's face. The figure was older than Reth expected. Short gray hair, a face marked by faint lines and one thin scar running from temple to jaw. The eyes, however, were what drew every gaze on the bridge. They were steady, unwavering, and completely devoid of the need to prove anything. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen, United Earth Space Command," the human said, her voice even, every word measured. "We are here on behalf of the Terran delegation to discuss terms for humanity's admission into the Galactic Council." The translation was flawless, not just in language but in tone. There was no hint of subservience, no supplication. Discuss terms carried the weight of a side already certain of its worth. Reth exchanged a glance with Lestra, then faced the screen again. "Admiral Chen, I am Commander Reth Varix of the Zevarian patrol fleet, escorting envoy Lestra on behalf of the Council. I must say, your ship is an impressive sight for a species so recently arrived on the interstellar stage." Chen's lips curved in what could not be called a smile. "This is a Retributor-class heavy warship. It serves as our diplomatic flagship." Lestra tilted her head slightly, almost challengingly. "A flagship bristling with siege-grade weapons?" Chen didn't blink. Diplomacy works best when both parties understand the consequences of failure. The choice of words settled over the bridge like a weight. Consequences. "I assume," Reth said, letting a note of skepticism enter his voice, "that the warship is simply a precaution." Chen's gaze remained locked on him. "It is one of many precautions. We have found that arriving without the ability to defend ourselves invites misunderstandings." Reth felt the edge in her tone, the deliberate ambiguity. "Our records indicate your technology is limited. Perhaps we should conduct an evaluation before serious negotiations." "I have no objection," Chen replied smoothly. "In fact, we anticipated that. Shall we begin with a demonstration?" Reth hesitated, sensing the trap and yet unable to step away from it. "Very well. What do you propose?" The human's expression didn't change, but there was something in her eyes now, a flicker of quiet challenge. "Observe." She gave a small hand gesture off-screen. The image shifted back to the exterior view of the Retributor. The massive ship began to pivot slowly until its forward batteries faced a particularly large asteroid drifting on the edge of the field. "Target, Class 4 silicate body, mass equivalent to a small moon," Chen's voice came through the speakers. "Weapon, primary kinetic projector, standard payload." On the tactical readouts, the Retributor's power output surged, but not to shield harmonics, and not in the frequency ranges of known plasma or energy systems. Instead, it spiked along a wavelength pattern the Zevarian computers had no existing category for. The forward cannon fired. There was no blinding flare, no roaring plasma stream. Just a flash of something almost invisible, a faint distortion in space. A heartbeat later, the asteroid simply disintegrated. Not shattered, not cracked. Gone. It turned into a drifting cloud of glittering dust that expanded silently into the void. Every sensor station on the bridge went into frantic recalibration. Numbers scrolled faster than anyone could read them. Energy yields were off every known chart. The velocity calculation for the projectile was absurd. Impact velocity. 32% of light speed, Haxrin whispered, his voice breaking the silence. And that had been a standard payload. No one spoke for a long moment. Then Chen's voice came back on the comm, still calm, still steady. "That concludes our first demonstration, Commander. Would you like to proceed to the next, or have you seen enough?" Reth found his throat dry. He had commanded Zevarian dreadnoughts for decades. He had seen the most advanced weapons of the Council's core species. And yet, As he stared at the cloud of dust where a moon-sized asteroid had been, he realized for the first time that he was in the presence of a power his fleet could not hope to match, and the Admiral hadn't even raised her voice. The dust cloud from the shattered asteroid still drifted in the viewport, faintly illuminated by distant starlight, when the Retributor began to move again. Not forward, not backward, but with a strange, precise grace, as if rearranging itself in the void. Panels sealed shut over the forward cannon, and a series of smaller hatches along the ship's flanks irised open, revealing nothing at first. Then, the nothing moved. Dozens of slender metallic shapes slid out from the recessed bays, unfolding delicate fins and sensor vanes as they spread into formation around the human warship. Each one glowed faintly with a dim blue light at its core, the only color breaking the vessel's pitch-black armor. "New contacts," Haxrin reported, his voice tight. 80, 97 autonomous craft. They're coordinating at impossible speed. Our sensors can't even isolate individual command signals." "They're drones," Reth said grimly. "Likely point defense." But the sensor data scrolling past his eyes suggested something more. These were not simple interceptors. Each drone carried its own compact weapon array, and each was maneuvering with the kind of precision only high-grade battle AIs could achieve. The swarm began to orbit the Retributor, layering itself into a three-dimensional defense web. Paths crossed, loops formed and dissolved, and not once did two drones collide. Every vector, every acceleration, every shift was calculated to the millisecond. Then the demonstration escalated. Without warning, bright motes of light erupted from the human ship's flanks. They weren't weapons, they were targets. Dispersed sensor beacons hurled outward by the warship's launchers. In seconds, they spread across hundreds of kilometers of space. The Retributor opened fire. It wasn't the methodical volley of a Zevarian gunnery drill. This was a storm. Microcannons barked in rapid bursts, spitting high-velocity slugs faster than Reth's eyes could track. Missiles streaked into the void only to blossom into smaller, faster projectiles that hunted the beacons like predators chasing prey. Every turret that had been hidden moments ago was now in motion, tracking, firing, recalibrating, none of them wasting a single shot. Haxrin's voice was almost a whisper. "They're engaging over 200 independent targets, simultaneously." Beacon after beacon winked out as the swarm tore them apart. Not one survived more than 4 seconds under fire. When the final sensor blip vanished from the tactical screen, the drones immediately returned to their precise orbits, as if nothing had happened. The human ship didn't gloat, didn't linger. It simply retracted the launchers, resealed the hatches, and returned to its patient, broadside stance. The comm channel opened again. Admiral Chen's voice came through, calm and almost dispassionate. "Demonstration 2. Multi-vector defensive response. Interception efficiency, 98.6%. The remaining 1.4% is acceptable loss under current engagement models." 98, Reth muttered under his breath. His own fleet's point defense network would have been lucky to intercept 60% of those targets in a controlled exercise, and that was with foreknowledge of the attack vectors. Chen continued as though reading from a report. "The Retributor's systems are designed to engage sustained attacks from multiple enemy fleets without degradation of performance. Ammunition reserves allow for up to 48 hours of continuous combat before requiring resupply. Shall I proceed?" Reth wanted to answer, but the words caught in his throat. He realized then that the humans weren't just demonstrating technology, they were teaching, deliberately revealing just enough to change how he saw them forever. On the far side of the bridge, Lestra's voice was quiet but cutting. "Commander, this is not a display for our benefit alone. This is a broadcast to the entire Council." And as the Retributor's black hull loomed in the viewport, its silent weapons waiting, Reth began to wonder. If this was only what they chose to show, what power were they keeping hidden? The space around the Retributor seemed to twist before anyone on the iron will could make sense of it. A ripple spread through the blackness, like the shimmer of heat over metal, followed by violent distortions of starlight. Hyperspace ruptures. The first emerged with a soundless flare, then another, then 5 more in quick succession. By the time the Zevarian fleet's tactical board caught up, over 30 hyperspace signatures had bloomed into reality around them. They were human ships. They did not match each other in size or silhouette. Some were lean and angular, with long, jagged prows bristling with weapons. Others were massive, slab-sided fortresses with armor plating so thick it distorted sensor returns. There were ships shaped like arrowheads, ships like floating citadels, and at least 2 whose angular geometries hurt the eyes to look at for too long, as though they bent the light in ways the mind couldn't parse. Each new arrival took up a precise position in a wide, encompassing formation. No collisions, no hesitation. They moved like they had rehearsed this for years, and yet every maneuver was fluid, alive, adaptive. Haxran's voice cracked slightly as he counted. 35, 41, 46. Commander, we have 49 human warships in system. 49 confirmed, all armed. 49. Reth repeated slowly, his mind struggling to process the number. The Retributor alone had already proven itself beyond anything his fleet could counter. Now it had company, an armada. Lestra's eyes stayed locked on the viewport. Not an escort, she murmured. This is a statement. The new vessels didn't crowd each other or rush forward. They simply settled into place, forming a layered sphere around the Retributor and, by extension, around the Zevarian fleet. They did not activate targeting locks, but every ship's weapons were powered and ready. On the tactical display, Reth could see it clearly. His fleet was encircled. The humans had arrived not as a diplomatic entourage, but as a noose. Then came something even more unsettling. The comms officer looked up from his station, pale. Sir, they've interfaced with our fleet coordination net. What? Reth snapped. How? They just joined it. No authorization request, no encryption bypass alerts. They're feeding us live positional data for their ships, as if we were on the same team. That was impossible. To integrate seamlessly with Zevarian Fleet Command software required weeks of key exchanges and authentication. Yet here the humans were, inserting themselves into the network without resistance, as if they had always belonged there. Admiral Chen's voice cut in over the open channel, smooth and deliberate. The Terran diplomatic escort will ensure the security of this meeting. No harm will come to any vessel while we are present. That includes yours, Commander Varix. It was phrased as reassurance, but the weight in her tone left no doubt. It was also a warning. Around the Retributor, the other human ships began small, purposeful adjustments to their formation. Every movement covered a potential escape vector for the Zevarian fleet. Any attempt to jump to hyperspace would put them directly into the path of at least 3 armed human vessels. Reth forced himself to keep his breathing steady. His fleet had been reduced from an instrument of intimidation to a collection of targets, and the humans had done it without a single hostile act. He glanced at Lestra, who still hadn't moved her gaze from the viewport. Her expression was unreadable, but her voice was like cold iron when she finally spoke. Commander, this is more than a display of strength. This is what conquest looks like when you don't need to fire a shot. The human formation held steady, silent, and patient, and that silence pressed on the bridge of the iron will like a physical weight. It was not the silence of hesitation. It was the silence of an opponent who already knew the outcome and was waiting for you to realize it too. On the tactical display, Reth watched the glowing markers of his fleet. 13 Zevarian warships, hemmed in by nearly 50 human vessels. Every firing arc they could possibly take was already covered. The humans didn't simply have them surrounded, they had them solved. He had spent decades in the fleet, studying tactics, outmaneuvering rivals, earning his place among the most respected commanders in Zevarian space. He could look at any battlefield and see at least 3 escape routes, even in hopeless situations. But here, now, with the Terran formation unfolding on his display, he saw nothing. "They've mapped us," Haxran murmured, his fingers gliding across the sensor controls. "Every ship in our formation. They've got targeting solutions on every one of us. If we move, they'll adjust faster than we can recalculate." "Can we break the formation?" Drez asked, though his voice lacked conviction. Reth didn't answer. His eyes remained on the tactical board, watching how the humans shifted position in tiny increments, never enough to seem threatening, but always enough to maintain overlapping coverage. Lestra stepped closer to the viewport, her hands clasped loosely behind her back. "Do you see it, Commander?" she asked quietly. "They're not reacting to you. They're anticipating you. Every possible order you might give, they've already positioned themselves to counter it." Reth's jaw tightened. "That's impossible. No fleet can predict every vector." "It's not prediction," Lestra cut in, her voice low. "It's preparation. They've studied us. They've studied everyone." Her words made him glance back at the comm panel, and an ugly suspicion formed. "Open a private channel to my console," he told the comms officer. A moment later, the data feed from the FleetNet scrolled across his screen. His stomach turned. The humans weren't just sharing their positions. They were mirroring his fleet's encrypted communications, intercepting and parsing every internal tactical update as if they were part of his command staff. His encryption protocols hadn't even registered the intrusion. They were inside his war room. The comm channel opened without request, Admiral Chen's face returning to the main display. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. "Commander Varix," she said, "your ships are fine vessels, capable, well-trained crews, but they are built for a doctrine that assumes you understand your enemy's capabilities." Her gaze seemed to cut straight through the screen. "You do not understand ours." Reth's pulse thudded in his ears, but he kept his voice even. "Then tell me, Admiral, how far does your understanding go?" Chen tilted her head slightly, as if she'd been waiting for the question. "We know your shield harmonics. We know the recharge cycles of your plasma batteries. We know the thermal load threshold of your engine cores. We know the names of your senior gunnery officers, and which of them favor portside firing solutions over starboard." Every word felt like a weight pressing down on the bridge. "That," she continued, "is what we know from a passive scan during your approach to this meeting. Imagine what we would know if we tried." No one on the bridge moved. No one spoke. Reth understood then that the power arrayed around him was not only in steel and guns, it was in knowledge. Knowledge so precise that the humans had turned his fleet into an open book before the first formal word of negotiation. Lestra's voice broke the silence, cold and matter-of-fact. "Commander, they're not threatening you. They're telling you the war is already over, should you choose to have one." And for the first time in his long career, Reth Varix felt the certainty that she was right. The air on the bridge of the Iron Will felt heavier now, thick with the unspoken truth hanging over every officer. This was no negotiation in the sense they understood it. The humans had not come to plead for a place in the Galactic Council. They had come to set the terms, and they had chosen this place, a remote, neutral asteroid field, not because it was convenient, but because it was the perfect stage for a demonstration of power. Admiral Chen remained on the main display, her presence commanding without raising her voice. "We will make this simple, Commander Varix," she said. "Humanity will enter the Galactic Council as a Tier 1 power, with immediate voting rights and a permanent seat on the Security Council. We will commit our fleets to joint defense operations and share limited technology with our allies. In return, we expect full recognition and the respect accorded to any senior member." There was no trace of arrogance in her tone, only certainty. The kind of certainty that comes from absolute leverage. Reth's throat tightened. "And if those terms are not accepted?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Chen's eyes never left his. "Then we will assume the Council does not value our cooperation, and we will act independently to secure our interests. We prefer partnership, but survival does not require permission." Her choice of words was deliberate. The implication was unmistakable. Humanity did not need the Council. The Council needed humanity. Lestra stepped forward, her voice calm but edged. "Admiral, I must remind you that the Council has long established processes for new member species. Vetting, probation, integration periods, envoy," Chen interrupted, not unkindly. "Your processes are designed for those seeking protection. We do not seek protection. We seek to extend it." The statement hung in the air like a challenge. Protection from what? Or from whom? Reth tried to refocus, to reclaim some measure of control. "You speak of defense, but you've brought nearly 50 warships into a neutral zone. How are we to view this as anything but coercion?" Chen leaned forward slightly, the first hint of sharpness in her expression. "View it as clarity. Every misunderstanding we prevent here spares lives later. No Council fleet will mistake us for an easy target. No hostile force will think us slow to act. This is not coercion, Commander. It is proof." The tactical feed on Reth's side console updated with new telemetry. The human ships were shifting again, but this time the movement was almost imperceptible. A kilometer here, 2 there, tightening their formation, closing small gaps in the encirclement. It was a subtle message. The noose could still tighten. Then Chen delivered the final strike, and she did it without raising her tone. "We have already transmitted these terms to the Council chambers on Nexus Prime. This conversation is for your benefit, so you may inform your superiors of the situation before the vote." Reth felt the heat rise in his chest. This was not a negotiation between equals. This was the announcement of a fait accompli. The Council could either agree or watch its influence diminish in the shadow of a new apex power. He looked around the bridge and saw it mirrored in the faces of his crew, the realization that every dreadnought, every cruiser under his command was now little more than a witness to history. The decision had been made the moment the Retributor appeared in this system. And the most dangerous part? The humans had done it without firing a single shot at them. The silence that followed Chen's statement was not the silence of hesitation. It was the silence of inevitability. Every officer on the Iron Will could feel it. The humans had made their position clear, and there was no tactical maneuver, no diplomatic counter that could alter the balance now. Outside the viewport, the Retributor loomed like a continent of black metal, its weapons still exposed, its drone swarm gliding in perfect arcs around it. Beyond it, the human escort fleet maintained their wide encirclement, motionless yet watchful, their presence a living perimeter no Zevarian captain could hope to breach. Reth Varix felt the weight of command pressing down on him. In 40 campaigns, he had faced hopeless odds and survived. He had tricked larger fleets into defeat, turned ambushes into victories, and escaped death more times than he could count. But this was different. This wasn't a battle that could be outmaneuvered. This was a truth you either accepted or died denying. Chen's voice broke the silence. "Commander Varix, you have seen what we are willing to show. Understand this. What you have not seen is far greater. We would prefer you remember today as the moment the Council gained an unshakable ally, rather than the day it failed to recognize one." Reth found himself gripping the edge of the console harder than he realized. "Why show us this much? Why not simply send your delegation and argue your case in the Council chambers?" For the first time, Chen's expression softened, not in kindness, but in the recognition that he had asked the only question that mattered. Because words are cheap, Commander. In our history, survival has never been won with speeches. It is secured by ensuring no one dares to test your resolve. The Council needed to understand that we are not here to take a seat in the shadows. We are here to sit at the table, or flip it. Lestra's eyes flicked to Reth, the faintest signal that the envoy too understood what was at stake. Commander, the Council will listen to you when you return. They'll want to know if the humans are bluffing. They aren't, Reth said before she had even finished. He turned back to the main display, where Chen watched him with those calm, relentless eyes. Admiral, I will report what I've seen without distortion. But tell me, how many ships like the Retributor do you have? Chen's answer was a slow, deliberate smile. Enough to make this conversation unnecessary in the future. The channel cut without ceremony. On the tactical board, the human ships began to peel away from their positions, slipping back toward the dark between the stars. The Retributor lingered for a moment longer, as if making sure the message had settled deep enough into the Zevarian bones before turning smoothly and following its fleet into the void. The encirclement dissolved as quickly as it had formed, but the weight in Reth's chest didn't lift. Lestra's voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the bridge. Commander, history will remember today. Yes, Reth said, his gaze fixed on the place where the human fleet had vanished. And it will remember who changed it. 3 days later, Reth stood in the council chambers on Nexus Prime. The hall was full, every species represented, their delegates buzzing with anticipation. Word of his encounter had already spread in fragments and rumors. Now they waited for the official account. When the crystalline speaker called his name, Reth stepped forward into the light. Honored Council, he began. I was sent to evaluate a species called humans. I return to tell you this. They are not what you think. They are not here to beg for a place among us. They are here to claim it. And unless we accept them as equals, we will live in their shadow instead of alongside them. The chamber fell silent. No one interrupted. I faced their warship. I saw their fleet. I watched them dismantle every tactical advantage I believed I had before the meeting even began. They carry weapons we cannot counter, defend with systems we cannot penetrate, and think with a speed and precision that leaves no room for mistakes. They do not need our protection. But if we are wise, we will accept theirs. He paused, letting his next words land like a verdict. Give them what they ask for, not because we fear them, but because they will keep us alive in a galaxy that is far more dangerous than we pretend. When the vote was called, the decision was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Humanity was granted full membership, Tier 1 recognition, and a permanent Security Council seat. As the chamber dispersed, Lestra approached him. Do you think they'll be good allies? Reth allowed himself the faintest of smiles. If you are wise enough to never betray their trust, the best we could ask for. If not... His eyes drifted toward the distant stars beyond the great chamber windows. Then may the galaxy never see what they are capable of when they stop asking. Far away, somewhere between the Council's space and the unknown frontiers, a black warship named Retributor cruised through the dark, her crew silent at their stations, her weapons sleeping but ready. Humanity had taken their seat at the table, and now the galaxy's predators would have to decide, hunt or keep their distance. For the first time in his long career, Reth Varix felt the strange, heavy comfort of knowing there was someone out there more dangerous than his enemies, and far more dangerous than his friends. The age of negotiation had ended. The age of consequence had begun.